I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is the Readathon. And I'm here with my Readathon partner in crime, Mel Barrett. Mel, remind everybody who you are.
Hi, Rebecca. I am Mel Barrett. I am the host of the In Between podcast, which is an investigative true crime podcast. And you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. And I've missed you.
I missed you too. I don't know what to do with myself.
I know, me either. I'm so lost.
It's like I only have to work 8 hours today. This is incredible. And here I am again, coming back to the Readathon. So what we're going to talk about today is some of the media that has come out since the not guilty verdict in the Karen Read case. And of course, I know that by the time we post this, like later tonight, there's probably going to be even more.
Every minute of the day.
We're going to talk about what happened over the weekend and so forth. And I know there's plenty to talk about. So let's get into it. I first do want to talk about the McAlberts, because they and Trooper Proctor have kind of showed up a couple of places. Yep. The McAlberts were on what, 2020? What did you see on that interview? Because you watched all these, by the way, we should say, and I have not had time. So what did you see?
I saw a lot, actually. It wasn't a very long interview. I get the feeling it was probably chopped up quite a bit. The interviewer, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head, so I feel bad about that, but we've seen him quite a bit on 2020, and he's been, I think, outside of the courtroom as well. I believe Turtle Boy, he might have even hung out with Karen's team at one point.
Yeah.
And got sort of close to Turtle Boy. They exchanged numbers and stuff, but Turtle Boy was like, I don't know what the hell he's doing now. But basically, he was asking them a lot of softball questions. He wasn't following up on anything like any kind of hard facts. And what I noticed most in the interview was that Brian Albert was centered. Of all the people, he was centered he was right there in the middle. It was Brian Albert, and then Nicole, and then Chris on his left, and then Jen McCabe on his right, and Matt McCabe on his right. And he was in control. And everybody was checking in with him when they were answering questions.
Not surprised at all to hear that.
I know. I first noticed it with Jen. And Jen she didn't really talk a lot, actually. I was kind of surprised. Chris did a lot of talking, which was shocking to me. But a question came up about the 227 search, and she very matter-of-factly said, she asked me to do it. But then she started to give a little bit more detail, and as soon as she started giving some time frame, she looked at Brian. It was so distinct. It was so, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe she did it, because it was just like, before I say this, I need to make eye contact with him and make sure it's okay. Chris did the same thing. Chris checked in with him with almost everything he said. The two of them were really checking in with Brian. And Brian Albert, oh my God, he was angry.
I'd love to hear more about that, because I saw some stills and some clips from it, and I still contend he is a scary dude. Scary. He looks so angry. We know that there have been complaints against him as a Boston cop. We know that he's beat people up that he's worked with. And he certainly doesn't put off the image of, I'm a reformed man.
No. And I will say, what we saw of Brian Albert on the stand was a calm, demure Brian Albert. This was a fired up, angry, intimidating, yelling Brian Albert. And he didn't answer questions either. He sidestepped so many questions. But here, I'll give you a couple of quotes from the interview, because they were just almost laughable to me.
Right, I'm ready.
Brian Albert starts off by saying the criminal justice system has let them down, meaning the McAlberts. And that the free Karen...
To be fair, that is true for the McAlberts.
I guess. But the Free Karen Read supporters, they turned their protest into a tailgate party with board games, cornhole. And then I noticed throughout the interview, all of them, they didn't really use John's name. They kept calling him this man or this guy. And they just disassociated, and I thought that was really interesting. Chris said that they've all been dehumanized, and that they are, I have to see if I can pronounce this right, because he didn't. They've dehumanized us, and we are caricaturers.
It's like garage. It's like the garage.
Caricaturers. He added an extra churs in there. And then basically Jen was like, anyone who's friends with us, they're cop killers too. And then Matt McCabe said,
also a scary looking guy, by the way.
They were Chris was the most calm of the men. There were the three men there. Matt he just came off as like a cocky jerk. Brian Albert came off as really angry. Chris came off as guilty, honestly. But, Matt was like, we took what we thought was the high road. We'll let the court do its job. They think that they are like above this.
Well, they're saying they think they're above it. Meanwhile, they're all on Twitter with sock puppet accounts tweeting back to people.
Especially Jen. But yeah, and the interviewer was like, he asked a couple of hard questions, I guess. One of them was, did John ever come in the house? And it was, no, never. Oh, absolutely not. No, he never did. But every single one of them looked at Brian before they said no.
Right.
And that was just really, it was unnerving to me that you could tell they were just checking in with him. He asked, why do people in your community believe in this conspiracy? I mean, these are your own people and blah, blah, blah. And Brian doesn't answer. He says, you do realize in order for there to be a conspiracy, all these people, firefighters and cops and blah, 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 we all have to be da-da-da.
Not true.
But he didn't answer the question.
Not true, Brian.
I know.
That's not how it works. How it works is that all you got to do is implant the idea that somebody said something and then they say you don't have to meet with them in a smoky room with 50 other people. That's not true,
no,
Brian.
It just has to be implied. I mean, and with
just got to be 6 of you.
Yeah. But it doesn't even have to be. I mean, I keep thinking like, what if this was just Brian Higgins and John, but it happened in Brian's house, so he's got to deal with it? Or what if it was Brian and John and Chris and Higgins and he's got to deal with it? So all he's got to do is move these, like, they're kind of right. They are pawns. They're
push
pawns
a couple
of Brian
levers.
Albert.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Was it glaring that Higgins wasn't there?
It was glaring to me, but it was never addressed and it was never brought up. I that would have been one of the questions I had for them. Why is Brian Higgins not here? Are you still talking to Brian Higgins? Have you seen him? Blah, blah, blah. None of those really hard questions. I mean, it's 2020, and I'll get into this later, but Bob Alessi in his interview with Ian Runkle, which was amazing and everybody should watch it. It's a good hour and a half long interview with David Unetti and Bob Alessi, where they're both just like on their, Zoom cameras like we are right now. And it's a love fest, but they really dug into some stuff. And one of the things that Bob dug into was the difference between the mainstream media and the independent media, which we've talked about in this case. And he had some really amazing things to say. So I think of it this way: 2020 didn't have enough time. They could only ask a certain number of questions from these people, I guess. But all I know is that Brian Albert is angry. And one of the questions that was asked was, you were a first responder and, your sister-in-law is bursting into your room that morning. What did she say? And he said something along the lines of, John's outside. We think he's dead. And he's like, they were all freaking out. And so the interviewer was like, so why didn't you go outside and help? And he got so mad, Rebecca. He was like, that's the most ridiculous question people always ask. What am I supposed to do? Am I just going to run out there in my underwear and start putting up yellow tape and blah, blah, blah? And it's like, no, you're supposed to go out there and start doing CPR, you douchebag. And I just was like, what is wrong with this guy? You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's fascinating. I'm completely fascinated by this. Did they address Chloe?
So, he said, he didn't really get into detail in the question. Every single one of them was like, they've known where Chloe is. That was the answer. Matt McCabe. They've known where Chloe is for 2 years. That was it. That was it. That was literally it. It was awful.
Yeah. That's so interesting. They're not doing themselves any favors. So I have a question about the anger part.
Yeah.
Is there any way that some people in the world would be able to, because I didn't see it and you did, interpret this male anger as I'm being protective of my family, or to just come out as straight anger?
No, it came out as he's pissed off. I honestly don't think, well, this is my opinion, obviously. I didn't get the feeling that he was trying to protect anybody but himself.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the pictures I saw, he and Nicole don't exactly look like they connect. They sort of both had, I mean, she had this like puss on, which might just be her face and not her fault, but like she definitely had this very miserable, and it's not like she was holding his hand or anything like that, right? Yeah.
No, none of them were touching. None of them were showing any sort of warmth toward each other.
That's a mistake, in my opinion.
Agreed. And what it felt like to me was that they were all in this together and they were pissed off at everybody that they were involved. So if Brian was actually, if he had something to do with this, not only are they afraid of him, but they also are pissed off that he dragged them into this. That's the feeling I got. Nicole said something interesting, like, they were talking about how their lives have been torn apart and that people, are awful to them. But this is their community and they've lived here their whole lives. They're not leaving and blah, blah, blah. And Nicole was like, and if anybody ever asked you to be a witness in a criminal investigation, I would think twice about doing it. It's like
you have a choice, Nicole.
You don't have that choice, Nicole. Maybe you think you do. Maybe that's the point.
That actually is a very revealing answer, in my opinion. My opinion is that what she's thinking of, if anybody asks you to make up shit to talk to the cops about, or if anybody involves you in some storytelling time, maybe you just want to be like, I don't want to fucking get involved and I'm just going to tell them the truth. Maybe that's what she actually means, but that's not what she thinks she means. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure she's pissed at Brian for getting them all into this, basically.
Wonder how many marital breakups will come from this. I've heard rumors, but I don't want to say for sure. I've heard rumors about Chris and Julie. I've heard rumors about Brian and Nicole. Haven't heard any rumors about Jen and Matt, but they're probably too busy going to sports to actually have marital conversations. So Michael Proctor has been interviewed. You watched that part of it too, right? Yeah,
nothing groundbreaking, but he is going down the road that his sister and his wife have gone down, like asking for like basically wanting the public to feel sorry for him. He wants the same thing. The interviewer asked him a couple of pointed questions. Again, it wasn't a hard-hitting interview. Basically, he asks about the text, hopefully she kills herself. And again, he said, it's a figure of speech. It's a figure of speech. I had strong feelings. My feelings started developing as the case developed. And as the interviewer, I wanted to be like, but you had these feelings within 18 hours. So what are you talking about, the case developing? And the interviewer did ask him, has it happened in any other cases? And he didn't answer. All he said was, I got emotional and I expressed those emotions in like a stupid way or whatever. And then, one of the funniest parts about the interview was the interviewer was like, Boston has a history of police corruption. And Proctor goes, yep. and he's like, so how did that play into what happened? Do you think that there's people have a reason to suspect the Boston police and the Massachusetts State Police of, corruption? And he's like, well, Alan Jackson had me on the stand for 2 days and he could have brought that up and he could have asked me, but he didn't.
Bev wouldn't have allowed that line of questioning.
No. And he basically was saying, he never asked me if I planted evidence. That's what he said. I was like,
why would he?
What are you talking about?
Because you would just lie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you would just say you didn't, I should say.
The most mind-blowing part, and this is the part that actually Alan Jackson has responded to, and Bob Alessi and David Unetti have all responded to in separate interviews. The interviewer asked him if he would have done any part of the investigation differently. And he shrugged and he said, I mean, based on what everybody's saying now and the way that everybody's blown this up, maybe I would have checked a few more cars and I would have talked to some people earlier. But yeah, no, the investigation was fine. It reminded me of...
Didn't he say something like, so I could tell people I did that?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Basically is what he's saying. It reminded me of the judge in the Pamela Smart case. He made that quip about he hopes that Clint Eastwood would play him in the movie. And I remember Diane Sawyer asking him in an interview after the trial, she said, do you regret saying that to the court? And he said, well, they've made so much of a fuss over it. Yeah, I guess I regret saying it. So it's the same kind of thing. It's like, well, if a fuss hadn't been made, then no, I guess I would have done things differently. Yeah. But because now the media is involved.
Not I regret what I did. I regret people reacting to what I did. So that's why I would have done it differently. That's such bullshit.
Yeah. The only other thing that happened in the interview is that Michael Proctor cried on camera, and I believe he was wiping his tears away with what looked like McDonald's napkins, but I'm not sure.
As one does.
He cried when he recounted his union rep coming by the house after he'd been fired to pick up his uniforms. And he said he fell to his knees in his yard crying.
All right.
And he cried during the interview.
I don't feel bad about that. I'm sorry, Mr. Proctor. I don't feel bad about that. You are a bad actor, and you I hope you don't get a chance to do better as a cop, but you're probably going to do
appealing.
Fine. I know he's
decision.
appealing, but he'll be a nice PI somewhere or nice security, head of security for some private company.
He thinks he got fired because of the text messages and that's it. He just said, I've never heard of anyone getting fired over text messages.
I think there's plenty of people in America who would say that they've been fired.
I think he means
a
cop. I think he means a cop.
Of course, cops can't get fired. It's really hard. All right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the long-ass Alessi Yannetti interview.
Oh, it was beautiful.
I saw a couple of small clips of it. I have not had a chance to watch the whole thing yet. I'm just like waiting until I have some time. But I hear it was lovely and juicy as hell. So what are your overall thoughts about it?
Well, first of all, my biggest takeaway is that I don't know if the audience knew this, and I certainly didn't know this. David Yannetti is 61 years old. And Bob Alessi is 67.
I know. I told Kevin that, and he was like, the fuck?
These guys are eating their spinach, man. Yeah. And the best part about it is that David Yannetti and Bob Alessi became like besties during this trial. They are workout buddies. They went to the gym each day. They lifted and they did cardio together.
I called it, did I not?
You did. But wait, there's more. I guess Bob is sort of well known for this. He's got some sort of a Yeti cooler.
Yes.
That his wife packs his lunches for him, or he packs his lunches, not really sure.
I think he said his wife makes his lunches. Yeah.
At home, his wife does, but here he was packing lunches for him and David. And so that David would eat healthy during the trial.
Nice.
And he would bring the cooler with him to court every day, and that's what they would do for lunch. So
that would become like a little internet meme. People were posting for a while what was in the cooler. And it was like an apple, a turkey sandwich, dry with provolone. It was all good stuff.
Yeah, this was a complete love fest, and it wasn't just between the two of them. The thing I loved about these guys is, I'll contrast it to Alan Jackson. Alan Jackson's pretty fired up right now. I think he's feeling like we did this.
He's the meme where he throws the firebomb behind him and walks away slowly.
Yeah, or like the waiting to exhale. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
He's pretty fired up. Bob and David are just like, man, this is the best. Like, we're so happy. But they basically spent a good portion of the interview praising everyone they could think of, including Ian Runkle and including the people that Ian Runkle has spoken to. But basically, every single member of the team, was amazing. This is something I didn't know, but David went to his old law school professor at BC and said, what can we do? We need help. And he got 8 interns from BC Law School, including the tech dude,
Mr. Wolk. Yeah, I know. I had heard that, and I saw them coming out of court the day we were there, the cute interns.
They said that some of the interns actually helped them write some of the motions, and they were very, very good. Liza, apparently, her legal writing is just off the charts, apparently, and that basically David was like, I learned something from every member of this team.
Amazing.
And they're just such good, humble guys. I have the biggest crush on them right now.
What do they have to say about Hank Brennan?
Bob mostly took this. So he basically was like, Hank's a skilled attorney, and I don't like to think of the other attorneys. I don't like to bring their any kind of personal thing into it.
That's very common. Yeah. They're just opponents. Yeah.
They're opponents, but he said that the hoodie incident changed his respect.
I'm surprised it took him that long, totally honestly.
I know.
There were so many incidents like the hoodie incident before the hoodie incident.
But based on what the jurors are saying, even the jurors understood that that's what the lawyers were supposed to do. So they expected some sort of impeachment of witnesses. And so I think that up until that moment, I think Bob was giving him the benefit of the doubt. So basically he said that he thought the charges in the case were unjust and unwarranted. The murder should have been withdrawn by Hank. But basically Bob said he was disappointed. He said he had 3 moments of disappointment in the trial, and that his heart broke for justice, which I thought was such a sweet thing to say. And he said when the hoodie thing happened, his heart broke for justice, and then he took a millisecond and then he went into overdrive to combat it. And it wasn't just Hank. He brought up Lally and McLaughlin, and that they just sat there and they said nothing.
Right.
And that was his second moment of disappointment when he did the motion for the mistrial, that really impassioned motion for mistrial. And Hank got up and said that he may have made an inadvertent mistake. And he said that was his second moment of disappointment. And the third was Bev's curative instruction fell flat and was not what it was supposed to be. So I feel like if Bob Alessi were disappointed in me, I don't know what I would do with myself.
I'd be so sad.
And then for David Giannetti, he said his first thought was Hank just lost the case. It allowed Alan Jackson to be able to rattle off all these like sort of nefarious acts in his closing, and that Alan Jackson was effectively able to like isolate and get it to the jury. If they're not telling you the truth about the hoodie, what else are they not telling you the truth about? And so basically it just sealed the case for them as far as David was concerned. So they touched on a few more things. It was mostly, like I said, a love fest. There was one funny moment where Ian Runkle called Dever Deaver, and David Giannetti laughed really hard and was like, don't call her Deaver.
I love that.
They didn't really talk about her very much, but I thought that was a funny moment. They couldn't talk too much about their decision not to call Michael Proctor.
Yeah.
I think it was David who said that Hank made several attempts to force them. And then finally, the strategy for not calling him, there was two parts. So they don't want to call Michael Proctor, but they do want to get the texts in. And part of that was because in the first trial, the reason why they didn't want to call Michael Proctor was that because all the boogeymen had been humanized in the first trial.
Yeah.
And they didn't
That's exactly what we thought.
Yeah.
And we're so smart, Mel.
We are so smart. I mean, we might as well be lawyers ourselves.
Yeah.
But,
we are now. What did he say about some other witnesses in the case? Did you talk about other witnesses?
Bob talked about Welcher.
Oh, what did he say?
He was very kind. But what he said was that he did not expect Welcher to act the way he did toward him. And that was, he didn't want to go into depth on that, but I think it was probably.
He's used to a, humane, like contrary but civil discourse in court, like the ARCA guys did. I mean, Hank Brennan went at them so hard and so angry, and they just remained extremely calm. There was a couple of moments where Rentschler lost his cool, but he still was chill when he lost his cool. But the witnesses for the prosecution really got personal with these cross examinations. Yeah, and Bob said that he felt like Welcher was obscuring the truth, which I think probably made him angry. He also called the blue paint a kindergarten experiment. Yeah. Which I thought was funny. They were very upset that they weren't going to get to cross the rebuttal witnesses. Oh. They were basically like, we were prepared for every single rebuttal witness, and we really wanted to have a go at all of them. And Hank was not going to get the bang for his buck with any of the rebuttal witnesses, so he didn't call them. Yeah.
But yeah.
So did they talk about that hearing that happened, that Turtle Boy hearing that they walked into, like the Kool-Aid men?
Oh, yeah. That was amazing. And I have to tell you that Bob Alessi was the one in charge of that.
Of course he was.
Which I thought it would be Alan Jackson, but nope, Bob. It seems to me like Bob's role on the team was to find the holes and then to just bulldoze through them. And he did the same thing with this. So just for the audience's reference, we're talking about the trial. If you don't remember, I'll just recap really quickly. There was a trial happening for Turtle Boy. It was a hearing, not a trial, for Turtle Boy. And Hank Brennan showed up and was trying to get the communication between Karen and Turtle Boy in that hearing. But he would have been able to use it for the Karen Reed trial as well, which means that it's there. He's talking about their client and their trial. Plus, they transferred the file number on Karen's trial.
I remember that.
Over to Turtle Boy's trial. So the defense had every right to be in that courtroom, but when they got there, the guards basically put them in a waiting room. They were trying to clear the door area. And so while they were in the waiting room, they basically sat down, they live streamed the Turtle Boy hearing. And as soon as Bob Alessi heard them, make the argument about the communication, he jumped up and he's like, we got to get in there. We have to get in there right now. Let's go. And the whole team just followed Bob. And they tromped upstairs. They came up to the guard, and Bob was like, I'm only going to have one shot at this. And he was like, I need you to know that they're in there right now and they're discussing our client in this hearing. And I really need you to let us in there. And the guard hemmed and hawed for a second. And then he finally let them in. And David was like, you could see Bob. He just burst through the door and went right up to the desk. And it was just amazing to me that little Bob Alessi was the one in charge of that. But yeah, it was a pretty interesting behind the scenes moment, and that it was Bob. That's not what I saw. I thought it was AJ, but
that's amazing.
And then there were a couple of questions about what wasn't allowed in that you wished had been allowed in.
Yeah.
And for David Yannetti, it was, well, they both said that the Commonwealth used the not allowing the FBI in as a sword and a shield, and it was really unfair on Bev's part. And then Bob also was annoyed that they wouldn't allow more of the alternate theory in.
Yeah.
He couldn't go into it very much, but I took that to mean the garage photos.
Totally.
The garage theory.
The garage.
All that. The the garage.
Can I just say something about those garage photos?
Yes, please.
Everyone's focusing on the burgundy paint, which is sort of, there is actually a divot in the bottom piece of wood, like right where the paint is. There's actually like, it looks like it was hit with something. Like there's a dent in that wood.
Right.
And I encourage everyone to look for that in those photos, because that's what stuck out to me. Anyway.
Don't you think, though, that if it were wood, there would be some material in the wound?
I don't know. I guess I'm not a pathologist like I thought.
I think that when the pathologist brought up that it had to be sort of a grainy surface, my immediate thought was concrete or like poured concrete.
Right.
So either the berm or that. But how are we ever going to know? I mean, how strange is it that if you haven't seen the photos, go. Is it on Turtle Boy, or did you post them?
They're everywhere now. Just Google garage 34 Fairview and they'll come up, and there's a little wall section where there's like this splash of burgundy paint going in all these different directions.
But it's the only place that it's there. Have you seen the wide photo?
Yeah, it's the only paint splatter in there. And some people have theorized that the paint was put there to cover something up. Some people are like, oh, it's just a mess. But the paint going in all different directions doesn't look like a regular spill. So, there's a lot of theories about it, but.
Yeah, it's weird that it's like red.
Yeah. Maybe they used it to paint Albert Rock. So, a couple more things that you observed.
Yeah.
He talked about a little about the witnesses, Russell and La Posada, right?
They loved Russell and La Posada.
So
they absolutely love. Yeah, so did I. So did Juror 11, apparently. Basically, both Bob and David, they just went on about how amazing these two women are, how smart they are. Bob wished that Hank hadn't treated them the way that he did. And then David told a personal story. I guess his brother was horribly bitten by a dog during the trial on his hand, to the point where one of the dog's teeth might have actually chipped off and been stuck in his hand.
That's a coincidence.
Yeah. And he was like, well, I have like a world renowned, dog bite expert. I guess I'll just ask Dr. Russell. And apparently she like personally called his brother and advised him on a surgical plan, and then followed up with him 3 or 4 more times after that without being asked. And basically he was like, she's one of the most caring people. And then also one of his good friends was the chief of police in Malden and knew her when she was a beat cop.
For 8 years.
And he was like, she's just an amazing person.
Incredible.
They loved Lucky. David has become friends with Lucky.
Of course he has.
And they were asked about Turtle Boy too. And David made a really impassioned plea. He was just like, enough's enough. Turtle Boy is collateral damage. And I thought this is really interesting. And this sort of leads into the only other thing I wanted to talk about in this interview. But David Yannetti called what Turtle Boy does old time journalism, meaning he walks up to people's doors with a microphone.
He's gonzo, yeah.
Yeah, and he hopes that they're going to stop the prosecution. But that led into sort of their thoughts on mainstream media versus indie media, which you and I have talked about a bit. And Bob Alessi said some really interesting things. He said he thought the mainstream media wasn't reporting the facts. He felt like they were trying to manufacture a vibe and that they were trying to push a narrative. Whereas the independent media, Law Tube, Turtle Boy, the stuff that we do, that we can have a longer, more in-depth conversation about the case, and that our reporting is actually more accurate.
Yeah. I'm sure it's also more inaccurate at some points, but I think about this all the time, that I'm actually writing an episode of Civics 101, the podcast I oversee about civics lessons we can learn from the Karen Read case. And journalism is a big part of it. It's a big, the First Amendment issues that overlap this case are incredible. And if you just I'm looking forward to telling these 3 people that I work with who know nothing about this case, that a person was charged with multiple felonies for writing blogs, YouTubing, and holding protest rallies.
Yeah. Well, and about the Duckies.
I'm telling them about Richard Schiffer, too. It's also in the script.
Oh, yeah.
Love that Richard Schiffer story. It's nuts.
They spent a long time with Ian Runkle, and they were just really nice guys, and they absolutely love each other, and I love them.
Yeah. So, Alan Jackson went on the Howie Carr show.
He did right away.
And he was fired up on the Howie Carr show, from what I understand. Is that right?
Absolutely. Howie's interview was very much like strategic and to the point. He asked him 5 or 6 questions. Alan answered the questions and then he jumped off. But very quickly, one of the first questions he asked was, do you have any doubts that this was a fair trial in Norfolk County? And Alan Jackson said he had enormous doubts. He never doubted Karen's innocence, but that he had doubts about whether this was a fair trial every single minute of every single day. And basically, they've gotten back-to-back acquittals, and that's never happened before. And now they're in the records books, basically. He talked a lot about Bev, which I found interesting because I don't know if he can get in trouble for this. So he is pro hoc vice, which means he can practice in the state of Massachusetts right now.
Which he did for the Spacey case, by the way. That was a Massachusetts case.
Yeah, and I think on this case, so as far as I understand it, Pam Smart's lawyers are pro hoc vice in New Hampshire, which means they have to get a New Hampshire lawyer to basically sponsor them. Yeah. So I assume that David Unetti did that for Alan all Jackson. The other lawyers on the team. So Howie was like, did you feel like the judge tied your hands? And he said, yeah, it was difficult. He said Brennan saying that Karen would get a fair trial was just lip service.
It was bullshit, yeah.
Yeah. The Commonwealth had a theme. They did not want jurors to hear evidence. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's so good with his word. He's just very concise. He gets everything out in a few sentences and you really understand, it's just very impactful. But yeah, everything they did strategically, the Commonwealth, everything they did was to hide evidence, hide witnesses, hide experts. And, that's kind of expected, I guess, from a prosecutor. And Alan Jackson was like, I can handle that. But when the judge is on the Commonwealth side, it makes life very difficult.
Absolutely.
And yeah, he has example after example of Bev making bizarre rulings benefiting the Commonwealth over the defense. He used the word bizarre. I thought that was interesting. He brought up one of the expert witnesses that he was on direct with, and he said that Brennan objected 49 times and she sustained every single one of them. He said he's never seen that before, that it's statistically impossible, but it happened, and that the judge had an idea of what she thought should be presented to the jury and how it should be presented.
We saw that. I'll let them talk about this, but not this. I'll let them. And it's funny because Colin Miller told me that usually experts, especially investigators, when they hire defense investigators, they can lead them anywhere. They can ask an investigator all kinds of questions that you can't ask other witnesses because the investigator did it's sort of like what you can ask cops, right? You can ask them anything about their investigation. You can do the same with investigators in a similar way. And that he was so limited in what he could ask the investigator shocked Colin Miller, shocked him.
Yeah. And she did the same thing in trial 1. And Alan Jackson said he thought it was abusive of the process, and that if he could talk to her today, he would tell her to do better, to not put her thumb on the scale. And he feels like she's not an impartial judge.
Yeah.
Do you think that he will face any kind of consequences for what he's saying?
I think that if he has a case in front of a judge that is very friendly to Bev Cannoni, maybe I doubt he'll have another case in front of Cannoni because I think she's going to retire. Yeah. And I also think that he would champion very, very hard to get a change of judge if that were the case. I don't think he has the right to reflect on the trial as much as he wants. And if he is retaliated against, he'll just talk about that too. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. He did have a lot more to say about the DA, though, than Bev, which I was surprised about that. I didn't really expect him to get into it, but he basically brought up Michael Morrissey. And again, he said, do better. You should be in the job of seeking justice, not in the job of winning cases. And he thinks that that's all that he and Hank were trying to do, was to win this case. And he thinks that's all McLaughlin was doing. He brought McLaughlin up and he said that she wrote abusive papers. Yeah. She was the one responsible for writing those motions. And he said that, they won despite the process, but it was an absolute travesty that it even happened in the first place.
Think about how good their case had to be to win this one. Think about it. I think about this all the time. We'll talk about what the jurors have been saying in a sec, but the jurors saw everything we saw, which is amazing considering what they didn't see. You know what I mean?
And absolutely. And from the 2 jurors that I've listened to, they picked up on everything we wanted them to pick up on, everything, including the next topic that came up on Howie Carr, which was the FBI, when he asked Alan Jackson what was the worst thing they kept out, and he said, the FBI, how can you defraud a jury by not allowing the defense to say ARCA was hired by them?
That's right.
But then allow the Commonwealth to get up and say that they were ARCA's employers. He was like, that wasn't a mistake. Hank did it on purpose, and he knew he'd get a favorable call from the judge. That's crazy to me. Do you have thoughts about that?
Yes, that is crazy. FBI being kept out the first time is crazy. The idea that the only thing about it that was good was that they were able to surprise a bunch of witnesses last time, which they didn't have those same witnesses this time to surprise. But yeah, no, it's wild. I'll never get over that one.
He said this kind of abuse should never happen in an American courtroom.
So what did he say about the FBI investigation?
He couldn't say a lot. He was asked, is the FBI going to continue to be involved in this or get involved in this? He said, I wish, which I thought was a strange answer.
He doesn't know any more than we do. That's why.
No. Yeah, I know.
He's literally giving the same answer that we'll give.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing when everyone's like, well, I guess it's over. I guess we're never going to know who killed John. And I'm like, well, hopefully the FBI will do their job, but I don't know.
Have you heard the news about Matthew Farwell?
You texted me today, but no, go ahead and tell me about that.
So his hearing for his case keeps getting pushed back and back and back. And today it was announced it got pushed back again. It was supposed to be like July 1st, and now it's going to be August. And
I was thinking September.
Yeah. And a lot of people think, and this is a very reasonable thought, because federal cases usually go pretty quick, especially on charges like this. And this is a death penalty eligible case.
Right.
And it's not like they don't have the evidence, right? They have plenty of evidence, but a lot of people think they were waiting for the Reed case to end so that they could go down more deal-making avenues with Farwell about people who were adjacent to the Reed case. So he could be trying to negotiate getting out of the death penalty or getting out of a lifetime prison sentence by, for instance, turning on his brother, turning on other cops, turning on the investigators who looked into the case. So we don't know, but signals point to something going on between Farwell and the government around his case, which is why they keep pushing it back, because the defense keeps asking for the delays, and they are being endorsed by the DOJ. So very interesting.
Interesting. They're asking for continuance in the Kohlberger trial as well, trying to gather more evidence. But I wonder if Farwell will try to make a deal.
Yeah, of course he will. That's why it keeps being delayed, because the terms are just continuing to be negotiated. I'm sure of it.
I found it interesting because one of the things that Jackson brought up was, he was like, he said that he was shocked the day that Hank Brennan stood up in court and said that the FBI the case was closed. And Alan Jackson said that he'd never heard of anything like that. He'd never heard of the FBI announcing to targets that the investigation was closed.
Yeah. That's a very telling thing that he said, because he said the targets, AKA the DA's office.
Yes.
So I just want to read, Hank Brennan did make a statement, which I found to be very Hank Brennan on brand. He said, he released the following: I'm disappointed in the verdict and the fact that we could not achieve justice for John O'Keefe and his family. District Attorney Michael Morrissey appointed me, giving me full discretion to independently assess the case and follow the evidence no matter where it led. After an independent and thorough review of all the evidence, I concluded that the evidence led to one person and only one person. Neither the closed federal investigation nor my independent review led me to identify any other possible suspect or person responsible for the death of John O'Keefe. So he's claiming to know what was in the investigation. The campaign of intimidation and abuse has been waged, funded, and promoted in public and on social media is the antithesis of justice. If this type of conduct becomes commonplace, it will threaten the integrity of our judicial system, affecting both victims and criminally accused. We cannot condone witness abuse causing participants to worry for their own safety or that of their families. So is he saying there that he would have had more witnesses if they hadn't been so, quote, afraid? It is my hope with the verdict, the witnesses and their families will be left alone. The harassment of these innocent victims and family members is deplorable and should never happen again in a case in this Commonwealth. My heartfelt condolences to the O'Keefe family and faith that over the coming years they will find peace and closure. Now, how much would you bet that if Hank Brennan were defending a case and had a free Karen Reed-esque movement on his side, that he would be all fucking in on bloggers and protests and ducks?
I believe that he would be very happy about that. But I also want to talk about the fact that his office has been engaging with and working with people who are actually harassing and intimidating and doxing people in this case.
That's right.
He always talks out of both sides of his mouth.
100%.
The hypocrisy is astounding to me with Hank Brennan.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was just another statement being like, we're in the right here and everybody else was harassed. And so everyone got scared and no one told the truth.
Right.
Bullshit.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
So let's move on to probably the most vibe-ish of all of the public interviews. Paula Prado, Juror 11, has been very available. She's
awesome.
She's so funny. She's given interviews to a bunch of the major TV outlets, Sue O'Connell, etc. And she gave a long interview with Turtle Boy Aidan Carney, at which Mark Betterow was also present. And I'll just say about Paula Prado, she's fucking awesome on Twitter. She's awesome. She is getting hard trolled, and she's just like, yeah, fuck you. And not in those words, though. She'll say something funny. Like, she'll be like, you know, I hope that after I'm rich and famous from my media tour, that you and I can hang out. Like, she'll say that to a troll. Like, it's so great.
To a troll, she'll say it to DePietro, who's the one who picked up on that. She's admitting it. That's
right. DePietro, by the way, huge piece of shit. Yeah. We'll talk about him in the next episode we tape. I don't want to talk about him today. I want to end on Paula. Okay. Because she's so awesome. So Turtle Boy talked to Paula Prado. I know that she very carefully weighed the evidence from what she said. I know that she came in maybe with a point of view, but she left not knowing the things that they didn't know. So that means to me, she actually weighed the evidence. And I loved what I heard about the process of the evidence, where they had the charges up on a board and that they would find the evidence to put under those charges. It sounds exactly like how a jury should run. I believe it's the jury foreman who said that in an interview that he gave. I'm not certain, but I
don't think he's actually given an interview. Has he?
He has given an interview without his name, and it was very illuminating. He has the memory of a steel trap, despite taking no notes. Yeah.
Yeah, they asked about him. Turtle Boy asked about him specifically, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, no, he has a brain for numbers. He didn't take a single note, and he knew more than any of us who took notes about this case."
Incredible. Yeah. So how was the interview?
The interview was great. She was like totally laid back. Everybody, obviously, it's Turtle Boy's channel. Everyone was laid back. She was laughing. She's just a tough cookie. That's the only thing I can think to say. She talked about how during the pandemic, she had a little bit of like a presence online. And so she sort of got used to harassment. This harassment's a little bit different. They're going after her and, you know, about her immigration status. They're going after her family. And she's like, you can attack me all you want. You can talk about my accent. You can talk about my hair. You can talk about the way I look. The second you start talking about my kids or my husband, then we're going to have a problem. And she basically was saying, I have my eye on a few people that seem dangerous. And when she goes out in public, when she goes to the store, she's got her eye all around when she's with her kids to make sure that no one's going to hurt them, which is really sad to me. One of the funniest things she said, though, was that one of the days after trial was over, she was driving her kids through the center of town of Dedham, and they were like going to a park. And she saw a bunch of protesters out on the sidewalk near the courthouse, and they had signs that said Turtle Boy this and Turtle Boy that. And she thought that they were out protesting an environmental issue.
Oh my God. That's hilarious.
She thought that a Turtle Boy was an environmental cause, and she had no idea that he was the blogger they were talking about in court. And she was just like, I had no idea who you were. Sorry.
I love that. But that actually says a lot. It says that she really went in with an open mind, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, jurors can know about a case before they serve on the jury. They absolutely can. It's whether or not they are judged to be able to weigh the evidence despite knowing about the case that makes them qualified. And this entire jury was approved by Hank Brennan. So if anyone thinks that there are any like plants on there, and it's Hank Brennan's fault for putting them on there, but I don't think there were.
Betterow made a really good point about jury selection. He was like, listen, everybody has their immigration status checked. You have to understand the English language in a way that you can discuss the case. Like, he went through a bunch of the things that they're like tearing her down.
Also, her English is fucking great. Her English is great.
She's great.
She speaks with like a little bit of an accent, but her English is great. And fuck anybody who says that she's not qualified because she has a fucking accent.
Was it, who's the ex-FBI?
Coffendander?
Twitter.
Jennifer Coffendander, that piece of shit, Jennifer Coffendander. I'll say it. She's a fucking piece of shit.
About the whole jury? She said they all should be deported.
She's insane.
She can fuck off. I could not believe it when I heard some of the hate that's coming at the jury. I was like, you guys are friggin' assholes. You know, I don't know. I feel like people like DePietro, we weren't going to talk about him. We'll talk about him next time. But anyway, back to Paula. She's amazing. She also picked up on some of the similar things that you picked up on in the text stream data.
What? Like what?
Well, so first of all, she said she wrote out an entire timeline in her notes based on the evidence they were giving her.
Yeah.
And in the middle of her timeline, she realized that the prosecution had changed the data during the trial.
Yep.
And she thought that Burgess was shady.
Mm-hmm.
And that she picked up on this, like the new supplemental report that came in May, like May 8th or whatever. She said that she discounted that info right away because of the way she's like, that should never happen. I don't know why it was allowed. She said that the changes in the time drift and all that stuff, it brought up basically a 10 to 12 second space in time that something could have happened based on the time variation to John. She didn't buy that his phone stopped moving after he got out of the car and that she believes he was walking after Karen left.
Yeah, that all sounds reasonable.
She also said that she loved Lucky and Barros and that I think La Posada, though, was her idol. I think she was like that woman.
La Posada was an incredible witness. I think about her all the time. She was the knockout blow witness as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I think the ARCA guys were awesome, but La Posada was a fucking knockout blow. Like her whole affect, her knowledge.
Yep, she didn't take any shit from Brennan, and I think that's what really stood out to this woman. And then she also clued into the fact that it was the FBI they were talking about during the whole trial because of Jen's testimony.
Yeah.
I think Jen actually even said FBI in her testimony, but she also, with those agents that followed her from the parking lot to the street to the house, that's when Paula was like, yeah, then I realized. And she knew why. She figured out why the FBI was involved. She said she thought the FBI was involved because they were investigating the investigators.
Yeah, well, they probably were. And they might still be. Who knows? I just want to issue a correction from our earlier conversation. I've gotten some feedback that there are, in fact, salespeople on the street around America, in particular Kirby salespeople.
Oh, Kirby. I love Kirby.
And I was like, yes, could you have mistaken them for FBI agents is the question.
But does anyone open the door for them?
I guess people do. They're pretty pushy. They're like, they come in, they're like, can I vacuum your living room? And then they pour some shit on your living room floor and then they clean it. And they're like, don't you want this machine?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a scam. But but I don't think anyone would ever confuse a Kirby salesman and an FBI agent, in my opinion.
No, unless they're not holding vacuum cleaners.
They're also probably not driving big black SUVs.
No, and they probably aren't wearing like Ray-Bans.
Exactly.
Aviators.
So this woman seems like smart as hell.
She is.
I'm very curious to hear more from the juror that it was profiled in the Globe today that said she changed her vote from guilty to not guilty.
There were 3 of them, apparently.
Yeah. What did Paula say about those? Did she say anything about those guys?
She couldn't really get into it too much because, she can't really talk about their deliberations. But basically, she said that there were probably 3 people that were leaning toward guilty on, I think, the manslaughter. Yep. Might have been murder, too. Can't remember. And that there were a few of them that didn't really know yet. But by the end of it, they were all in agreement. And she did talk about the false start, the verdict. And she basically said that the verdict slip said exactly the same thing it said when Bev read it out or when it was read out in court. The only reason why they went back is because there was a juror who was really concerned that if they found her guilty of that OUI, that it would be a problem. Like she might be found guilty for other stuff.
That's exactly what we said.
Yeah.
It's because they didn't want to make a mistake. Mel, we are so smart.
We're so good.
I literally said that it was because they didn't want to make a mistake.
People should pay us for this.
They should pay us for this. We should be legal consultants.
We should go on tour.
We should be legal consultants. By the way, if you do want to talk with me and Mel in person about this, you can join us at the True Crime Podcast Festival in Boston in July.
The 18th through
the 20th. You can use code CWO for 20% off. We are going to be hosting a casual conversation about the Karen Read case, maybe with a PowerPoint. We'll see. We at least have to have a chart of who the fucking people are. We
probably should do like a family tree of everybody.
A family tree, and we should maybe do like a picture of the taillight. Look at us working this out right now. Let's pick out some key stuff.
We can do some like pertinent pieces of information from the trial, just so everybody knows who everyone is. It's not going to be a panel. It's just going to be you and me chatting.
Yes, and I think it's going to be an audience participation kind of situation
awesome.
Too. I think Kevin might want to join us too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Mel, thank you so much for following all the media so I could learn all about it.
Yeah, it was good. There's so much more coming out. I'm sure we'll have more to talk about.
All right. Thanks, Mel.
All right. Thanks.
Crime Media.